Okay, we are live, Jack.
Sounds great. So, hello everyone. Thanks for coming to the second May 2025 TNT meeting. This is off the back of a meeting we had a couple of months ago, 2 months ago, where a member of Congress council person Holden's office came to us to talk about what is it, INT 06062024 about the possibility of um, requiring identifications on e-bikes and motorbikes uh, from the DOT. So that bill is in discussion, and we were asked whether we want to support it or not support it. And from that conversation, as you may recall, we discussed inviting Captain DeSaro to speak with us, where we can talk about current enforcement of e-bike issues, as we know that that's a major issue within the district. So I guess before we generally start asking questions, maybe I'll ask like a more general one to Captain Sorrow first. What's the state of non car issues that we have seen in CB10 or in District 68, and what is our plans that the police department has around e-bikes and bike enforcement, just to set the stage there, and then we can move on to other discussions.
Sure. Obviously, as the weather's gotten warmer, we're definitely seeing an influx in I call them two-wheel devices, because obviously there's a myriad of like different types of devices we've seen used out there, whether they be mopeds, electric, gas powered, what have you. So these two-wheel devices, we've definitely been seeing an uptick in them. There's been a lot more congestion involving them. We've seen a lot more groups traveling together, whether it be juveniles or whether it be individuals stacking up on the street near commercial establishments. The enforcement with them, it can be difficult because there's definitely some safety issues that take place. We see a lot of them operating on the sidewalks. That's the bulk of my community complaints that I get with them. And then I see a lot of I get a lot of complaints about our parks being utilized by these devices as well. It's always a focus of the precinct. We're always concentrating on them. We do our best to enforce them when safety permits. And a lot of the times we also try to be good partners to our commercial establishments out there. If it's like a delivery, a person working for a delivery company or what have you. And then, at other times we have to take into account, individuals' age that might be conducting, acting in more of a criminal manner out there. We'll see a 15-year-old on a gas-powered scooter riding through the neighborhood without a license. That's something we try to address as best as we possibly can. So those are mainly the things we're seeing right now. We're definitely seeing an uptick in grand larceny auto involving these types of devices as well. They're making up the bulk of my GLA crimes. And what we'll find is we'll see the groups of these moped devices, two-wheeled scooters, things of that nature, traveling together. They'll steal another bike and then they'll take off into a different neighborhood. So hard to keep track of. There's definitely a myriad of issues that go in. As far as the e-bikes are concerned, the electric scooters and things of that nature, like I said, we try to be good partners to our community establishments, but within reason too. We also want to respect the pedestrians and our people that are operating cars as well. Make sure everybody, vehicles and two-wheel devices are abiding by the laws of the road and the VTL code. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions going forward, and just give it back to you.
Yeah, feel free anyone to raise your hand, and we can start a discussion. From your description of two-wheel devices, in my mind, like regular bicycles, e-bikes, mopeds, motorcycles, like all of those are two-wheel devices. All those are very different in my mind, right? So out of those four categories, those last two categories are effectively required licenses from DMV, right? So which of those do you see the most problem with in the district?
The biggest problem right now is the gas-powered mopeds, I would say. Anything that looks like that, essentially. Those are those heavy, those heavier devices, the ones that you would take a seat on. I see a lot of juveniles operating those, acting recklessly. I would say those are the biggest concerns that the precinct has right now. Because being very straightforward with you, we took about four of them yesterday. This past month alone, we've made 6 arrests related to those mopeds, and in 3 of those incidences, 3 were reported stolen from GLAs. So those are the biggest things. We found them traveling in groups and also operating in parks, which is like totally unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. I just as recently I got complaints about Shore Road Park that they were using the pedestrian walkways over there. We're trying to focus over there. Going in and out of McKinley Park, I know has been an issue. Leif Erikson Park as well. So we're kind of surrounded on all sides with parks, and it seems to be the general place where these bikes tend to meet up and operate. So those are our biggest concerns that we see, and those are the biggest complaints we have coming in. I would say.
And presumably with gas-powered ones, it would be like a lot of noise as well, noise complaints as
Yeah,
well.
for the most part, it's gas powered ones. Not so much the noise, more so there's the reckless operation, sidewalks,
Okay.
especially driving up onto the pedestrian rampways, things of that nature.
And
Yeah.
that does require like licensing and I suppose registration for
Yeah,
those, theoretically.
the vast majority of the individuals we get on those are not licensed, not even really of age to be operating them. I would say.
Yeah. And I would say too, Captain and Jack, that's what we're hearing at the district office. I mean, we've had lots of parents share videos with us of mopeds. It's even hard for me to identify them by looking at videos, whether they're gas powered or electric powered, in the playgrounds, in the play equipment areas, in the basketball courts, on the Fort Hamilton athletic field. This past weekend we had quite a few, and I did share those with you. And parents and seniors mostly are those that reach out to us with safety concerns. So, and I know it's complex, it's difficult but the question that's asked often is how best to report to you. Is that a 311 call? Is it a 911 call?
I would argue we're past the point of 311.
Okay.
I think these have to go direct to 911. I remind everybody to call and then call again especially if there's, whether it be gas powered or electric powered, if it's operating in a park and it's violating parks rules and regulations, I would really prefer a 911 call and then a second follow-up one to express the urgency that, we got kids in a park with a two-wheel device that's operating potentially recklessly, even if it's not operating recklessly, like they're not supposed to be in there. From what I gather, from what I understand, for the most part, these, especially those gas power ones, they should not be inside the parks. I would really prefer a 911 call because that's going to come direct to us rather than go through 301, who would then determine, where, it's just another person in between. I would recommend it coming direct to the police department at that point.
How are these mopeds being sourced, right? So each, I presume, has some kind of VIN or VIN-like number. Presumably, they're sold somewhere. Like, how are they getting a hand on these? And like, what can they do about it? What can the regular owners do about it?
So, I mean, you're saying how are they being stolen? What was the question? All right. All right. It appears very simple. I do have a video of a group of about 15 bikes driving down a residential street. One motorist jumps off of one bike, gets onto another. They seem to just drag it away and then hotwire it. From what it looks like, they change the ignition out. They get in there, they recable it. One of my teams caught somebody live doing that exact thing the other night. So it's where they're coming from, where they're stealing from. It seems to be all over. I'm getting addresses from all over the place, bikes stolen from all over the city that are transient here. So it's a rough question. It's definitely something very difficult to track and trace. We're doing our best, but at the same time, we got to make sure that the safety of everybody else is in play here. When you're trying to stop a two-wheel device, you got to be very smart about it because we found in the past whether you don't want to get a ticket or you don't want to get arrested or you don't want to get caught with a stolen bike, they tend to run. So we have a very strict no pursuit policy. I am huge with that. I do not want to see my officers involved in pursuits, especially in a congested area like the 68th precinct where we have a lot of children traveling through the neighborhood on foot. It's something very difficult to monitor and track, and like I said, it happens. They can steal these things in a split second, so it seems very, very easy.
So okay, in terms of the, I guess I don't know how else to better phrase this, but like, are the people who are stealing the bikes within this district? the same people over and over again, or is it like very different people?
I'm not,
And
yeah, I'm not seeing a pattern of the same individuals over and over again. We have our one or two that we keep an eye on, but we're definitely seeing, transient individuals, I would say, coming in and out.
okay, all right, Stephanie, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being here, Captain DeSauro. Two questions. I imagine this is a citywide problem. It seems very
Yeah.
overwhelming. And does the 68 work with the rest of the city to address this? And then the follow-on question is there a broader strategy to address this problem? Or it just seems like, this is not a criticism, but for lack of a better term, whack-a-mole, because you really just have to send your guys out when necessary. And if there isn't a broader strategy, are there city agencies or legislators that could be activated to assist? Like what's missing to address this? Thank
I
you.
don't, I really, I would be, I don't want to comment on legislation. I try to stay out of that as much as I possibly can. Whatever the law is, I'll enforce it. Whatever, communities decide is best for the community, they vote on it, and their representatives decide. I'm happy with it. I'm fine with. As far as for us, when you say like whack-a-mole, it 110% feels that way. I can tell you this year we've confiscated 88 mopeds, two-wheel devices, what have you. I tend to say mopeds, but we've confiscated 88, and it feels like when I take 88, it doubles. There's that many more out there the next second. So it is like a back and forth game. And the police department, we don't like, I don't pick and choose like when essentially I'll be going out to like do it based on a condition. It's an everyday thing that we go through. It's always on our radar. We're always focused on these conditions. The department has, made it a big part of their crime strategy reduction plan starting in January. This was a big focus. They wanted us to focus on it. And as the warmer weather gets nice, I'm seeing the uptick myself. So, yeah, no, the broader plan here on my end, at least, I can tell you this partnership. Yesterday, the primary call that I had with my adjoining command. So we border here the 6-2, the 6-6, the 7-2, all four of the captains, myself included. We all got on a call together and we decided, tried to come up with a strategy on how we're best going to attack this problem together, respectfully. A lot of times I'll hear the 7-2 precinct right next door will be facing a condition in real time where they'll have, a group of bikes traveling, maybe acting recklessly, coming our way. They'll make sure to communicate with us. We'll do the same with the 6-2. So that's the coordination. We're all up on this together. The problem is, like you said, it's, anytime you feel like you're making any type of headway on it, it feels like they multiply and they come out more. I'm feeling it too. I'm getting sick of seeing my lot full. And then, it empties out and I think, okay, maybe we're going to slow down. And then we're right back up full again with them. So it's a balancing act and we're doing our best here. That's what I could put out.
Thank you.
Jack, we have a public question. Did you want to go to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I have many more questions, but yeah, we
Oh,
definitely
okay.
please aboard, like feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions.
Okay. Joanne Polis. Joanne, you should be able to unmute.
Yes, hi. I'm an older person, and my concern is just walking on the sidewalk. My concern is possibly getting hit by one. They come so close. Who would be responsible if you were to get hit and injured or worse, fatally injured? Who would be responsible then, since these bikes are not licensed?
So these bikes aren't supposed to be operating on the sidewalk whatsoever. We've issued, I don't like giving numbers, because there's I could say, oh well, I've enforced this amount of times. That doesn't help your perception of like what's going on. You know what I mean? It doesn't make you feel any better to know that 21 times this month we've issued this many summonses, because when you're living it in real time, it's concerning still. It doesn't feel like the problem's addressed. But no, it would never be the individual utilizing the sidewalk appropriately, walking on the sidewalk would never be held accountable for being struck by a device that's operating unlawfully on the sidewalk.
I don't understand what you're saying. The person walking would not be accountable.
No, a person walking on the sidewalk would not be accountable, would not be, at fault for being struck by one of these devices.
What we mean is who's responsible? DoorDash, Mike's Diner, or the guy who's driving the bike who probably doesn't even have any insurance?
I understand what you're saying. So like liability wise, that I would. I know that if I'm enforcing it, if I'm there, I'm documenting the individual that's operating the device. I'm not necessarily I'm not doing anything with DoorDash and or the business itself.
They don't know.
No.
Do you
Again,
do you partner
again,
with like a DoorDash to educate on these kind of things? Like, what kind of outreach do you do on that front?
No, so our outreach is strictly local. There's no partnership really with like DoorDash or anything. It's a good idea. That's something actually I'll bring back to the department. We primarily go business to business though when we're doing like our outreaches, our educations and stuff like that to and have that like local businesses encourage their delivery workers, anybody operating an e-bike in that fashion to encourage them to follow the rules of the road.
Okay, I think that's fair, but I think like most deliveries don't take place from like individual restaurants
No,
that have
no.
delivery drivers, right? It's more operated by Lyft and Ubers
No,
and such that.
and that's true. That's something we could, I think we should probably, it's not something I thought of before. It's something we could probably explore on our end. It's a good idea.
And obviously with they're registered with Uber Lyft. They have 1099s right there. We know who they are. We should do outreach. You guys should do outreach to help educate that side and help educate on the best routes and such. I want to zoom in a little bit on the problems. So obviously we know prima facie that bikes being on sidewalks, these mopeds being on sidewalks are problematic. What do you have stats around the injuries that happen in the community on the sidewalks or even outside the sidewalks in parks, etc.?
So for two-wheel devices this year, we're actually down. We got year to date, we have about 26 collisions involving motorized two-wheel scooters. We're actually down 2 incidents. We are year to date for traditional bicycles. We're up 1 incident, 21 versus 20. So that's where we're standing right now with the motorized two-wheel scooters. We got about 26 versus 28 for the year, so we're down 2. So we are seeing, a decrease in that aspect.
How does it compare to regular four-wheel vehicles?
So for regular four-wheel vehicles, I would have to break that down for you in comparison. I mean, this year alone, we had 492 collisions year to date. With that, when you look at the motorized two-wheel scooters, it's 20. They account for 26 of them. So
In year to date last year?
no, that's year to date. That's going from January 1st to now, and then versus 2024. Yeah.
What was 2024? So you was 492 was this year's or
Yeah,
was
so
that
we had
last year's?
400, and as year to date, we have 492 collisions this year versus 487 in 2024. And then when you look at the motorized two-wheel scooter, they account for 26 versus 28 from last year.
I'm just doing some math. Okay, interesting. Okay, what do you recommend? Sorry, Doris, you have a question. Go ahead with yours. Please.
Oh, Doris, you're on
You're
mute.
muted.
One of the complaints I hear from friends throughout the community is two wheels vehicles of all types riding against traffic and not obeying traffic signals. And how can we address that?
So again, this just going back to the enforcement that we have been doing, when we can get these bikes stopped, we do the enforcement on it. I have a traffic team that's basically dedicated to all sorts of traffic, right? They're focusing on a myriad of different types of traffic and enforcement things going on in the command. When it comes to just the specific two-wheelers, that's not just even focused at just the traffic team. That's a command-wide issue that we're facing. So it's an all hands on deck approach. That's my neighborhood coordination officers. That's my public safety team. That's my sectors on patrol, and that's my traffic teams. Because we hear the complaints stemming from both community members, whether it be at the community council meeting, the community board meeting. We are getting inundated with these complaints from all angles. As far as we go to address, like correct the actual behavior on the NYPD's end, it's going to be enforcement related, whether it be issuing a summons, making an arrest, and then what I like to see, if the bike is not, properly registered, a confiscation, because that takes the problem off the road. Other times it might be just, a warning. Like I said, if it's a local, business, individual, we can have an educational conversation with them. There's a variety of different ways we try to address these problems. And it all really realistically depends on, the manner in which the bike is being operated, the type of bike. There's a vastness to it. And that's the problems we're seeing too. There's several different aspects of these that we're faced with. And not every situation is the same, I would say.
Good.
I wanted to go back a little bit to the Uber Lyft issue, and obviously, the original question from the public was, who is responsible if, let's say, someone got hit? Who is responsible if something got damaged because they're riding against flow of traffic or hits some person's property, right? So, is Uber or Lyft, is the delivery company, is the restaurant responsible for that behavior?
So I can only answer, I can't tell you who would be responsible. I can tell you, as documentation wise, if I was coming to fill out an accident report involving one of these individuals, the person that was operating that vehicle would be documented on the accident report. So that's who we would, wouldn't say Uber is responsible for this. I would only document the two parties involved. And that would be our end of documentation. As far as who they were employed by at the end of the day, I would leave that to the insurance companies to go through and figure out.
Or if they were in the practice of delivering something.
Correct.
Is that similar? Let's say if like a UPS driver was delivering something and hit some, drove into a house or hit another car and damaged a car. Like, what would you note that on your injury report in those cases?
So
that they were just some random person XYZ, or that they were a UPS driver?
No, so what would happen is they would be identified via the registration of the vehicle as UPS, related, but the operator of the vehicle, their commercial license, everything like that would be documented on the report as well.
Right. So if you're not registered, just to follow up on Jack, if you're not registered, Captain, if you're not required to be registered, it wouldn't be a registration. There wouldn't be an insurance card like a vehicle would have. I think that's kind of the concern that, the resident who was here was saying, the concern is without registration or requirement of insurance, then who ultimately is responsible? And that's, I guess, a bigger question than us that would require legislation. That's one of many pieces that's out there.
That's definitely a little bit beyond, the realm of the police department. When we show up, what essentially happens is we document the parties involved that are on scene, and the paperwork that's presented to us is what we are, able to document. If there's no registration for the vehicle, if there's no affiliation with like an Uber Eats or a Lyft or something like that, there's not much to document other than who's here now, so that's what we go based off of. And then everything else after that, however people want to follow through with civilly or whatever it may be, that would be on, their representation to determine.
Right, understood. Thank you.
Okay. Dino?
Yeah, so according to Captain DeSaro, the biggest issues here are the mopeds, not the pedaled e-bikes. It's the ones without pedals, either gas-powered or electric, that go over 30 miles an hour, which is actually classified as a motorcycle. You need a motorcycle license, and you need to have registration and insurance already as it is. So, in terms of talking about this proposed law of requiring registration for e-bikes, it wouldn't really apply in the majority of these cases that are problematic in our district and citywide. Is that correct?
Is that a question to me? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not commenting on legislation or anything like that. I could just tell you like what we see out there, and what I see like most problematically, like operated wise, is the moped two-wheel devices, electric or not. Like the problems I see, like the best way for me to explain it, when I use the word like moped, I'm thinking like anything you're sitting on, you know what I mean, with handles, essentially. The stand-up scooters, the electric bikes that like, have the ability to, pedal and power. I'm not thinking of those. I'm thinking like these sitting devices that you see, because a lot of times I'll pull
like the Vespas.
Yes, exactly. Okay. So I'll pull something over, and there'll be a discussion with me and the motorist as to what this is. because, you know, you can't tell from the blind eye. So, you know, I've had motorists get pulled over before and look at me and go, hey, this thing goes below 25 miles an hour. It's not, there's no exhaust on it. It's not, I'm like, okay, you know, upon further inspection, it's, you know, not an e-bike. I'm sorry, not a gas powered moped. It's a different type of device. So it takes a little bit of investigating. So when I say, you know, a specific term, that's why I try to stick to two-wheel device as best as I possibly can, just to, you know, because those are the conditions we're facing out there once we pull them over. But the biggest problems I see are the sit-down devices being operated out in the street.
So I just want to add, like, that's why it's really important for you to be a little bit more transparent about your statistics and whatever you guys are gathering on your end, because I think the public is a little bit confused and they conflate mopeds and really what should be classified as a motorcycle and already requires licensing registration. They conflate that with pedaled e-bikes, you know, pedal assist, or even if there's a throttle, you know, they only reach about 20, maybe 25 max if you're like really pushing it.
Sure.
And those, you know, as of now, don't require that. And they're clearly not the ones that are posing the biggest threat to the public.
Okay, Chris.
Thanks. Just to note for a record, 25 miles an hour is fast. My father was hit by an e-bike. His car had a huge dent in it. It was because of the way the streets were set up. The motorist lane was parallel to the DOT set up parking lane, which was parallel to the bike lane. And when he went to turn, it was a complete blind spot, and the bike ran into him. And he got up and left. It wasn't a moped, it was an e-bike. So, you know, really put this in perspective. You have a lot, I know we're talking about a licensing thing here right now, but this is a very complicated issue where our streets are changing rapidly, and public safety is not the primary consideration, but rather rolling out this fantasy of reducing emissions with all of these different new vehicles out there, and not properly taking into consideration how people can all operate together on the reconfigured streets. We lost proper street equity because we have less vision. Okay? Note that for the record in everything we're talking about on this committee, because we're losing sight of that. We really are. And I'm mad at our elected officials and everyone else, but I thank the police for being here and giving us these statistics, and we know how difficult their job is. We can't make it any more difficult.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Stephanie?
Yeah, if I could just parse it out a little bit more, Captain DeSaro, when you've gotten calls for bikes or two-wheel things in parks, what are those specifically? Are those also the mopeds?
So we find out when we get there, basically, you know.
Okay.
You know, sometimes the caller will specify, sometimes they won't. So like I said, every situation is kind of hit or miss. The recent ones have been more about, like, you know, those I guess, you know, just to say sit down devices, because I really can't say. By the time we get there, we see them a lot of times they take off. So we don't have the time necessarily to stop them and determine what it is. Once they see the cops usually come, they tend to flee these parks. They'll come over as a couple of different types of call for us, whether it be reckless driving, disorderly groups. You know, I see both of those a lot. Those are the two most common ones.
So you can't necessarily capture those in your statistics?
No, as far as like the calls that we're going to,
Yes.
no, so yeah, they come over as disorderly group and reckless driving calls, so I can't necessarily like capture that. I could tell you, you know, I think it was Mother's Day, we went to one at the park, and there was, you know, quite a few bikes that had went into the park, and upon our officer's arrival, these bikes had taken off. We'd gotten there within about 7 minutes of the 911 call, and you know, once they see us start to approach, they basically break off on their own.
Okay, and the seated vehicles, are those also the ones, are they the egregious parties on the sidewalks, or are those mostly like the pedal assist or scooters?
I've seen both.
Okay.
I've seen both, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Carmen has a question. Jack, Carmen has a question.
Yeah, please.
I know, like, somebody who's a speeder with a car, do you also, have you been arresting people that several times speeding with motorcycles or motorized bikes or anything? And
So-
what happens in that case?
So that's what we don't so much focus on the speeding with these. So to be able to, you have to have a special type of training. So our traffic team is really like the ones who are like trained in like speedometer training and things like that. They use something called they have like a speed reading device essentially that they get trained on. Not everybody on patrol has that. For the most part, we have our patrol guys focusing on every other infraction. The biggest takeaway for us for reason for a stop is any type of reckless maneuver in the street, whether it be a U-turn, going against traffic, operating on the sidewalk, obviously. And then, of course, when we see these gas-powered ones operating without like a license plate on the back, that's an automatic reason to attempt to stop somebody and take enforcement action. As far as speeding goes, I'm not even trained in being able to estimate somebody's, apparent, speed. So I would be hesitant to, comment on like that type of like how to get that enforcement done at the street level, I would say.
I have another question.
Go
Okay.
ahead, Carmen.
There's these videos, I hate to say this, but I love watching them periodically from Staten Island, when they confiscate these two-wheel vehicles, they line them up. I don't know if you ever seen, and then they smash them.
Okay.
You said you had a backlog in your area. Can you bring them to Staten Island to do it?
So that's something that's organized by the department overheads. They do that in conjunction with like the city. They do press conferences when they are doing that. That's not something we organize at the precinct level. A lot of ours will, if they're not, claimed they were illegally operated or, they will be transported somewhere else where eventually they'll be held. And honestly, what happens to them after, I can't even truly comment on, but I have seen those same things, and that's not organized at the precinct level at all.
Okay.
Interesting. That was going to be another one of my questions. Where do they go? I can you help clarify what bikes, if any, are allowed in parks?
In parks, so it's my understanding, my biggest focus right now, and I want to speak like, clearly on this. I'm not 100% sure, what the exact park rules and regulations are. I know the gas-powered motorcycles, mopeds, things like that are not supposed to be in there. Those, I would say, are the primary cause of concern we got. Whether people confuse them for those, again, the sit-down e-bike ones or whatever it may be, and they think it's a gas powered, but those are the ones I'm most concerned about because I know a gas powered device is not supposed to be operated inside of a park. As far as regular like pedal bikes and stuff like that go, I'm sure it's on a park to park basis based on the park rules and regulations of that park. But the primary focus of the precinct right now would be those heavier bikes, I would say, those ones that have some weight behind them. Again, the mopeds, the ones that could go at increased speed, cause real damage, or sit down related bikes.
Yeah, I mean, we've had calls from cyclists too, over the last few weeks on the promenade, with issues with the gas powered, which are not allowed. Of course, the bicycle, it's the bike path,
Right.
it's for cyclists, and there's been some issues, with the gas powered or the mopeds going from the bicycle path to the pedestrian walkway, which is a concern for sure. Thank you. That's
Do we
helpful.
have any other questions, comments from the committee? Okay. Dina?
Yeah, so I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like these things don't happen. I've said it a billion times. I ride my bike every single day. I see everything out on the streets. I would agree with Captain DeSaro that the gas-powered mopeds are the ones that do pose a pretty big danger, especially when they're on a bike lane and they just like zoom by. Whether I'm on my e-bike or on my regular bicycle, it's not very nice to, have something like that with so much weight just zoom by and not even, notify you before passing. The thing with this proposed law is that it seems like it would make it easier to target delivery workers in an environment where delivery workers, who are primarily immigrant workers, are being scapegoated or they're being unfairly targeted for quality of life issues. And I just don't see how this would help that situation, this particular law. And again, what you're saying the biggest issue is something that is already in the books as something that's illegal that needs enforcement. You know, these vehicles already need licensing and registration. So, you know, again, in terms of this particular proposed law, I don't see how it would be helpful at all for the overall public safety.
Chris?
Well, and that's a good point. And I would say that we should ask our elected officials to consider that the onus is on the vicarious liability, that let's assume the majority of these writers who are, I guess, on the edge of like legally writing because they're doing it for a commercial purpose, the onus would be on their employer to enforce better safety among those writers, because they would ultimately be vicariously liable for their actions. But I want to just go back to the original point again. Yes, sure, the majority of these problems may be resulting from a particular two-wheel segment, but just remember, it's about safety completely should be the goal. If you see bike riders who are not wearing a helmet, who don't have reflectors, that's a problem. Their own safety is in jeopardy. So don't minimize that because you're more supportive of that. You should be supportive of their safety and everyone else's safety. That should be a common thread through this committee. Okay? But to the original point, maybe we should advocate to our elected officials that that legislation should in particular focus on the people who are, the employers, that they're not enforcing safety for their own drivers. Okay? That's my suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, I largely agree with that, and I think we should take it upon ourselves to kind of recommend that in addition to providing an opinion on the original legislation. I guess just to I have the legislation pulled up in front of me. Just to remind everyone here, I'm just going to read the title of it and read a quick summary of it. The local law is to amend the administrative code of the City of New York in relation to requiring that every bicycle with electric assist, electric scooter, and other legal motorized vehicles be licensed and registered. And the summary is, this bill would require every bicycle with electric assist, electric scooter, or other legal motorized vehicle that is not otherwise required to be registered with the DMV to be registered with DOT and receive an identifying number, which could be displayed on a visible plate affixed to a vehicle. So that's the initial bill that was proposed a couple months ago. Any other comments? Oh yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and again, Jack, and I really liked your idea, prior, when you brought up the companies, but just rereading that legislation, it's like if City Bike is unavoidable, for example, legislation like this is unavoidable. It's going to happen because it becomes more, you're releasing a different type of traffic into the streets, and so it's going to happen. And it's important that we talk about these details for sure. Everyone's opinion on this is important because we don't really want to penalize low income, wage earners at all. But who's enabling, some of this ubiquitousness of, these types of vehicles in the streets? So, we have to demand more of a lot of the companies that are involved in this for sure. So thank you for rereading that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, Jack.
Yeah. It does surprise me a little bit that like the companies are not liable. Like I guess I try to give the example of like the UPS thing like a little bit earlier because in my mind it's kind of very, very similar in the act of, doing your job basically. Carmen, you had a comment to raise first and then we'll go to Doris.
Well, I don't think there's a problem making anybody have identification because I think in New York, anybody over 18 has to carry identification anyway. And with these bikes, you can have somebody who's on a bike get hurt. If he has no identification, how do you notify his family or get him help or know the right way to treat him if he has no other ID? There's people, in an accident, you can have It could be either party. That's what I'm trying to bring out. And I had a conversation with a restaurant owner who was telling me how his delivery people have a hard time getting just from the restaurant to somebody's house. And he goes, I know they're not speeding, but they're coming up a bunch of, all these obstacles in the street, two double parking, triple parking, just getting from point A to point B. And just talking to him, I know if one of his people got hurt, he would help take care of it. But at the same time, if one of his people had an accident and there's no identification, he wouldn't even know. To me, it's just important because I know if I got hit, I would want to know, I would want some identification there. Or if I'm in a car and we hit somebody, having some kind of ID helps the person. It's not targeting anybody. An accident can happen at any time. It's just a preventive thing. And it just doesn't make sense to me that some people can go around stealing bikes, no ID, wreaking havoc, and then the other part of the population is trying to do the right thing and have ID. Or it's just convoluted to me. It should be everybody. You want to ride a bike, a motorized bike, have ID on the bike. It's that simple. It's only fair.
Okay, Doris.
I think safety is the most important consideration here. And it's the safety mostly for pedestrians, but also for the operators of these vehicles. And I think some kind of legislation would be very helpful. But safety is the biggest priority. And to ignore that on our part would be negligent.
Okay, Dina?
I agree that ignoring safety for the cyclists is negligent, and yet we have no protected infrastructure in our district, aside from 7th Avenue, I know, for cyclists and for delivery workers to go about their workday safely. We should also be advocating for the delivery apps, to be accountable for placing these time restrictions that force these workers to behave in ways that may be dangerous to themselves or others, like going on. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think there is legislation on that, Dino. They're working on.
We should be advocating for that. We should.
I think it was passed already, honestly.
It was passed. Okay, so
Yeah.
they're gonna change that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna look it up. I remember it going through, and this was some time ago. They were working on reducing the time, but I'll do some research. I'll reach out to the electeds and see if that went through.
That's fair. And also, I just want to remind everybody that cycling is an affordable way of transportation, and putting additional roadblocks to that is going to hurt a lot more people than it's going to help. And if somebody crashes into you and takes off, it doesn't matter if they have literally a tiny little placard on the back of their bike. You're not gonna see it. I mean, right now there's so many hit and runs that the NYPD doesn't catch. You can report a million things to 311 and the NYPD has 8 hours to respond to it. They're not gonna, the enforcement aspect of it isn't realistic. And enforcement doesn't translate to better safety. I mean, this could also be used right now with this quality of life initiative that the NYPD is rolling out, where they're criminally summonsing cyclists for minor infractions. They're sending them to criminal court. Drivers don't have to go to criminal court. How is that improving safety? And then adding this additional thing, I mean, it really feels familiar to the whole stop and frisk that was going on. And I can totally see this being used arbitrarily to abuse people's rights.
Yeah, I think. Jack, we have one more question from the public.
Okay.
Joanne, did you have one more question?
Okay, I would have to agree with Doris. Safety is the number one issue. Again, speaking as a pedestrian, I'm not talking just about the e-bikes or the electric bikes. I'm talking about regular bikes. If everyone coexisted before they bring in more city bikes into the neighborhood, it would be nice if we could all coexist and follow safety rules. Bikes, any kind of bike, should not be on the sidewalk. Now, whether they get ticketed or the e-bikes get licensed, everyone should be able to, like I say, coexist together, safety, number one, like Doris had said. And again, I'm speaking as an older person, concerned for my safety. Every time I walk on the sidewalk, every day, someone is near missed by a bike or an e-bike or something. So again, something has to be done, whether it's legislation or ticketing or something. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne.
Are bikes allowed on the sidewalk? Just kind of point of clarification. No, right? Absolutely not. It's already illegal for that to be the case. So
No,
Doesn't it depend on age?
I think under.
it's an age, like
age,
13
yeah.
or under, I think, like 13 or under with the
Yeah.
little kids bikes, it's fine, but anything older, okay, yeah. So it's kind of already legal. I guess what can we advocate for, Captain Asaro, that would like help with that? Because we can't have bikes on sidewalk. That's obviously a through line. Obviously, the gas power thing is a major issue, but like, where's the enforcement on that?
Must
And
be
going in the wrong
challenging.
directions, Jack. I
And
think
going wrong directions,
going
yeah.
against traffic, it's very important.
No,
Can
it
you
must
just
be so
Combine
challenging.
and follow safety signals.
Can you just repeat the last part of your question? I'm sorry, Jack. You said what can we advocate for, and then you said one more thing.
Yeah,
I
I
interrupted.
kind of said two things. No resource. I said two things. One is it's already illegal for bike riders over the age of 13 to ride on a sidewalk, right? But we still see that. So where's the enforcement there? That's kind of question one. Question two is what can we do as a community board, as a committee, to advocate for in terms of potential laws that would be helpful to NYPD in enforcing those kind of laws, both on the sidewalk issue as well as on the contraflow issue.
So I don't want to push you in any which way to advocate for any type of law change or legislation or anything like that. I can basically give you the breakdown of the numbers with like what we have, right? When like if I go and I break down my two-wheel devices even further, all right, for the year, I can tell you that traditional bicycles, right, we've had 21 collisions this year versus 20 last year. E-bikes, we've had 5 collisions this year versus 1 last year. Stand-up scooters, 9 this year versus 8 last year. Mopeds, 10 this year versus 9 last year, and motorcycles were actually down 2 versus 9. So those are my two-wheel devices. That's the breakdown I can give you as far as like, what my numbers read out there. As far as our enforcement for bikes on the sidewalks, you're right. Like, there's an age limit on who can operate. And then we even take, the NYPD tends to take in the recklessness of the operator as well. If somebody's, going onto the sidewalk to avoid, let's say we have a double parked car issue, something like that, and they're going on to simply just, protect themselves. I'm not going to hold that office, that bike rider accountable necessarily. We might have an educational conversation on what to do better next time. But like, for the most part, we take a certain sense of recklessness based off our operations into account before issuing summonses or anything like that. In April, we issued 21 bike on the sidewalk summonses alone. Again, I don't like to like throw out numbers for enforcement because I get it. Like there's perception and there's what's going on and what the enforcement is, and then there's like the perception of what the public safety aspect is. I can provide you with data and I can provide you with like trends that we're seeing in the command. I would just advocate for communication like this amongst everybody here to come up with like an overall approach to how they want to see the police department go forward and enforcement and correcting these conditions. Because just like what you said before, I never took into account the Uber Eats or anything like that, or reaching out to Lyft. I think that's a great idea. I think implementing it at the command level and then maybe, seeing what they're doing throughout the city with it would be extremely helpful. So that's what I, object to. I think it's more important for us to just have these conversations back and forth, and then we'll follow suit with you guys and what you think is in turn what the community board thinks is best for this community.
I see your hand up, Chris, but just one more question for me. Any sense on the distribution of those 21 bikes on sidewalk?
I'm sorry, excuse me?
Any sense of distribution within the community? Like, is there any concentration in one area or the other that someone's
We're scattered. They're all over. Honestly, the 6A in as a whole is experiencing a trend with this. It's if you look at the map, it's kind of like a I hate to say it like this, but like when I have my dots on the screen, it looks like a shotgun blast. They're all over. So that's
okay.
it is spread out.
All right, Chris.
Yeah, no, I was going to add, hopefully this kind of rounds it out. And again, Captain Desaro, we don't want to add to your work, we want to help your work. And there are all these factors coming into play, and none of them are, should be, looked at in any diminished way at all, but kind of taken into consideration on the whole. And we know that every year we have National Night Out, and maybe on a city level and even on a corporate responsibility level, we want to look to these companies to help, promote public safety, to promote safe bike riding and all of these things on a national level for our young people and for safety for our older adults, everyone using our streets and our sidewalks, that they need to take a role when we do that annually to promote proper two-wheel safety. Maybe that's an apex for us where there's nothing new that you have to do, but it's par for the course that every year that this happens, and it's an opportunity for us, and we should ask our city elected officials who too often like to go and promote a new piece of legislation or something that's happening as a win and not really think about the details about the impact of what they're doing, to like, hey, your job's not done. Okay, how do we make this safe for everyone? Get in the mix with us. We don't want to just see a table with you representing yourself at this one night event. We want to see you with our police department, promoting safety, promoting children safe bike riding, all the things that we all want. We don't want people targeted unfairly, but we want safety. So maybe that's something that we can do. Maybe we can talk to our legislators about that, to like look at National Night Out that one time a year, make it a focus on that type of street safety in addition to all the other types of safety issues we're concerned about, and really like have an impact on how people act in the shared space that we're using, because I don't see changes that DOT is making to the streets and the ubiquitousness of all these vehicles as the answer alone. That's all I'm saying. But thanks, Jack.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, like I agree. Like the affixing of a small sticker on bike, I feel like isn't really doing anything. But your point around the National Night Out and many of your points in that statement kind of reminded me of something else. You know how in Central Park you have police officers who ride horses, right? You know, you kind of see them, they're kind of out on the street, right? In 68, do we have police officers out on bikes to kind of demonstrate good bike behavior? Like, is that, I feel like I've never seen a single one.
So bike there used to be officers assigned to precincts that, were bike qualified and would go routinely out on patrol. That is not something that's routine anymore at the command level. We don't operate on bicycles anymore. As far as I know you were saying with the horses and stuff, that's the same thing too. It's the mounted unit. They're deployed very strategically to different areas, but no, there are no bike patrols. It's something that kind of faded away in the police department.
Why is that the case?
That I wouldn't have the answer for. I know it was something that was, when I was a young officer about 16 years ago, that was being done, and it was starting to fade out then. So it's been some time since we've had officers routinely on bike patrol throughout, at least in I know the commands I've worked in, the 6-8, it's definitely, I don't, maybe at Coney Island, you might see some bike patrols on the piers, but definitely not the local commands.
Interesting. I wonder if we can help bring that back, because I feel like that's an interesting, easy win there.
I'm all about it. If you want to get me on a bike, no problem here. I'll be right with you on it.
All right. Summer's here, Sarah. You should be out. Okay. Dino, please.
Delivery workers in New York City have the highest rates of injuries and fatalities of any other profession, including police officers. It's the most dangerous job in the city to be a delivery worker. So maybe, your officers stopped riding their bikes because our streets were just too dangerous. And to really pin that point down, in 2024, according to NYPD data, there were 9,610 collisions with pedestrians in New York City. That resulted in injuries. 0.4 of those, so I think that's 37, were attributed to e-bikes. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of, and I'm not advocating.
I can tell you 38, and the guy would not stop for my father to help him. He rode away.
These are the ones that were documented. Not every single.
I know, but I'm just telling you, we wanted to help him. His bike was going so fast, it dented metal, and he got up on his bike and left. That's terrible.
You can't control everything. That's just like the reality of life.
But it's not about control. It's about public safety and helping people. That too, Doris, but it's like
I just
Listen,
read
my father wasn't gonna like do
90,610
anything
were
malicious to
attributed to
him. He
motor
was
vehicles.
concerned for his safety and he rode away. And I'm not saying this licensing is the answer, but you're put in a situation
No,
where a
but if we're going to
company
talk
is
about
creating
safety,
it.
motor vehicles should really be the primary focus.
Oh my God.
Mhm.
DOT is
All right, thank
ruining
you,
his spaces.
thank you both. Okay, do we have any other comments from the committee? Carmen.
I just looked up online, there's a group called the New York State Restaurant Association and the National Restaurant Association, because we just focus on 2 delivery services, but they may have a larger overall picture of, concerns they have, maybe ways to do this better. So it might be a good idea if you're gonna just say, talk to 2 delivery services, actually go to the largest delivery service that handles all type of restaurants. Because one of these website, one of the first things they said is that takeout food being delivered is 30%, 37% higher. So more people are ordering food to have delivered. So they may have other statistics or other ways of planning or safeguarding these, delivery people that we haven't even thought about. Because they're doing it on a much bigger scale, not just in Bay Ridge, but throughout the whole city.
Okay, so what do we want to do here? So there's a number of different avenues forward for us, right? Here's what I would advocate for. I see from the list of sponsors that one of our local elected officials, yes, okay, Justin Brandon is on that list. So there is a potential advocacy point there. Obviously, he's a sponsor on the bill itself, right?
Jack, one thing first, please. Let me just say this to Dino. Dino, if we want, we can reach out to groups that do know your rights, okay? And we can work with them to help make their constituency safer riders. Because I hear what you're saying. I work with programs that really help marginalized people or people that are very vulnerable. And I understand that. And my primary concern is their safety and that they are given their rights and that they have help. But you can't say, I don't want any kind of enforcement because I'm worried about them. It's like we're all worried
I just
about
said I
them.
don't want any kind of
Okay.
enforcement. I
Well,
said
but
there
but you
are
have to
already things that
understand
are
that
illegal that need to be
we have to have
enforced.
a course of action. And perhaps, Jack, we want to include that we can reach out to Know Your Rights group, New Immigrant Communities for Empowerment, Mixteca, a whole number of organizations that we can reach out to. Okay. I want to put that out there because I really think we're flapping in the breeze with what DOT and what a lot of elected officials are doing. And I'm glad there's a representative on this call because they need to be held accountable for the changes that are taking place very rapidly in our community. It's election year, so let's hear what they have to say.
I do see a Q&A from the public. I'm just going to read it out loud. Does the new proposed law require that e-bikes used for commercial deliveries be inspected for approved batteries? No. The current law that's under discussion, INT 06062024, does not have anything to do with that.
I'm looking through the council, and this seems to be a law.
Sorry, Josephine, can you repeat yourself? I think you froze up
out
a little
there.
bit. Was that just me? Okay. We
I don't know. We have
lost
to
the
look.
district.
Oh, I
Josephine,
think we're
can
back.
you-
Yeah, we have a bad connection.
There we go.
Internet is not stable here. My
There we go.
apologies.
That's okay. Can you repeat the answer to the question that you said?
Yeah, no, I was just saying that I was looking at there's a very long list of city council sponsored bills in addition to 606. I mean, probably too many for us to go through on this call. Maybe it's something that we could, look at to answer the residents' question. I don't want to give out misinformation. There's a few bills out there. Some have, just to get a sense of what's happening, I think for the committee. We could do that. I'm just having trouble with internet, so I can't really look it up because everything's freezing here.
It's okay. Yeah, battery fires are a major issue for NYPD in general. I've heard many warnings about battery fires, so I think it would be good for us to discuss at some point in the future as well. Doris, you have your hand up.
Yes, I remember reading a piece in the Daily News a while ago. And basically the author said, stop complaining about delivery bike riders. Pick up your own food or just cook yourself. You know, we are the problem by overusing delivery apps.
Indeed. For the record, I do not use any of those apps. I cook my own food at home. Okay.
But we as a society are doing that.
Yes, fully agreed. Okay, so in terms of route forward, I'm just going to propose a motion, and we can discuss any potential amendments to that. In my personal opinion, like reading the bill itself, it does not really do anything to kind of solve the core three problems that we're speaking about, right? The one about the gas-powered mopeds, which are already required to be licensed, and the issues around theft there. The issues around bikes on sidewalks, which is already illegal. And then the issue around contraflow, which again is also already illegal. And one I heard from Captain Sar earlier, which is that like whenever 911 is called and the police shows up, like the bikers just kind of bike away. And I feel like the bill just doesn't do anything to actually solve a problem. It just kind of creates a bureaucratic hurdle, and not even through a DMV. So it's kind of like through a different agency, DOT, who issues permits, and like for me, that doesn't really do anything to actually solve the problem. So I would kind of propose a motion to kind of state just that. The bill is ineffectual. It doesn't really solve the core issues that like underpin our community right now, right? And we kind of list those out. In response to that, we would advocate for a bill that would kind of put the liability of potential issues that, you know, in the course of doing commercial activities such as delivering, that either the liability goes to the employer, or that there must be some kind of additional enforcement upon, you know, like an example of the UPSs or the FedExes of the world, where the vehicles are owned by the company, right, are licensed to the company or are owned by the company, right? You have that through point into that. So if you're a delivery driver, you use a bike from the company, they issue that, you don't bring your own vehicle to deliver something. And then, you know, the liability goes to that. So that's generally what I would be proposing here, kind of disapproval of this bill, given those, you know, reasons I stated, and then advocate for, you know, ways to actually solve problems around, you know, delivery drivers, given that they are probably the most causing most of the issues, given the speed that they need to be at, etc.
I would agree. I think the bill is not a solution at all. I would agree.
Okay, I think I saw Doris first and then Stephanie.
Well, I think the bill is a first step, and then we can move on to some of the issues you have addressed. But I think something has to be done, and this is an incremental step.
Stephanie?
I also agree with Doris, but I'd also say with all the conversation about safety, would you not want to tack on something about, particularly for the delivery worker group, that there would need to be training and safety? They are the most vulnerable here, and we haven't made mention of that. I don't want it to be a passive message, that should be explained explicitly.
Okay, I can add that on to my motion, that last point on training.
The sponsor of the bill again is who, Jack? Where's it coming out of?
There's a whole list. If you just Google INT 06062024, you'll see a list of sponsors. I just recognized one of those names, given that they were a little bit like the official.
Okay.
I think there's about 20 or so names on that list.
Yeah, it's a workforce development issue too. It is.
Yeah.
Jack, just an additional comment, if I may. I mean, is this a flat out rejection of the bill, like don't support at all, or we'd like to see a bill perhaps molded and shaped differently?
more the latter. Like in its current state, in my mind, like it just doesn't actually do anything. Even if it passes, like all it does is put up a like additional hurdle for people who are not actually causing issues, given that like the mopeds, and the actual like regular bike riders are required to put a sticker on the bike, and then the people who are actually stealing bikes, people who are actually like causing the issues, given what we heard the stats earlier, like doesn't do anything to target any of that.
I don't disagree, and I am hesitant about saddling DOT with additional responsibilities. I mean, they keep taking on things. I don't know what their enforcement capabilities are, but I would hate to completely dismiss this. I see it as an opportunity to, if something's on the table.
To adjust, to pivot, potentially ask them to like, hey, this is what we're seeing in the community, like these are the issues, and we kind of list down those issues, and we think some other ways, or like we can come up with potential solutions here, or ask the city council to come up with a potential solutions there to actually directly address those issues as opposed to this.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Makes sense.
The opportunities should come out of this.
Yes.
Absolutely. Right.
I fully agree.
I have a question for the captain.
Yep.
Could this legislation, could some kind of registration be helpful to you in enforcement and when you are confronted with difficult situations with two-wheeled vehicles?
So in terms of like registering a device like an electric bike, sure, it would be helpful in identifying, motorists and stuff like that. 100%, whether it be, related to that hit and run we were talking about earlier, or vast majority of things, it could always be helpful. I'm hearing the pros and cons of everybody tonight, and I'm kind of taking it in and, kind of educating myself on the matter as well. So. But yeah, I would say from where my standpoint now, my opinion would be that yes, it would be helpful to the police department.
Thank you.
I think that's.
Would you be able to? That's a good point. Would you be able to disassociate between a stolen bike and the owner of the bike in a hit and run?
What do you mean by that exactly? Like, so
Yeah, so Doris has a bike. I like Doris's bike very, very much. I steal Doris's bike and I, hit a car. Doris is gonna be in trouble for that.
So
Right.
in this scenario where Doris is on a crime spree, all right, yes, I would say that would be, something that would help us, it would, something of investigative value to us. Yes, and I would argue that.
Understood. Okay.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, there's already an NYPD program that encourages cyclists and e-bike riders to register the serial numbers. So
Sure. We also do VIN etching too. That's not VIN etching, excuse me, etching of bikes too. That's another way of identifying.
That's
So
right.
let's say we recover it or something like that. There's if the bike is properly like etched, we'll be able to, look at the bike and determine like, hey, this person's in this program, we could potentially get them to. So yes, that's a good point. They're actually connected to that as well.
So maybe if accountability is the real issue here, then maybe having somebody, put in their serial number on an online database would be equally helpful in that regard. Maybe.
Right. And some of the city council discretionary funds do go to neighborhood safety events where the NYPD partners with local volunteer groups to do those bike etchings, right, Captain? I've seen those before. They're very good.
Yep, we do them with bicycles. We do them with catalytic converters, all sorts of things where, you want to, if something doesn't have a clear serial number on it, you want to try and get it registered. There is programs through the department. I'm sure other agencies do. Also, if I can stress on this call to the gentleman's point before, knowing your serial number on anything you own is a huge, huge, plus. So please, IMEI numbers on your phones, electrical devices, whatever it might be, having that is always very, very helpful for, from an investigative standpoint.
Yeah, and I read about this kind of program on like internationally as well. Most of the time, these kind of registration programs are obviously optional, but also are primarily for like anti-theft. Like, hey, I register my bike with local police or with local council, and if it got stolen, they would know to contact me that it was found in whatever place. So interesting, and that's the case, but that's not necessarily the goal of this bill either. Okay, so I have a motion on the floor. Hopefully, I've written it a little bit more clear and a little bit more directly. A motion to write a letter to local elected officials regarding this bill, INT 0606, to require that the bill, or to amend the bill such that the bill addresses local issues. Specifically, we list out the gas power moped issue, the sidewalk issue, the delivery driver training issue, as well as the corporate Uber Lyft style liability issue as well. So basically, those four points. Do I have a second from the floor? Chris seconds. All right. All in favor of that motion, please raise your hand.
Yep, okay. That's everyone.
Any opposed? Okay. Any abstentions, recusals? Okay. All right. Motion passes. All right. So I'll present that motion. I'll try to be a little bit more clear with it, but basically try as best I can summarize what we've said tonight in that motion in the June meeting, June 2025 meeting. Okay. With that, I think that's the last agenda item we have.
Yes. Thank you very much, Captain Tesoro, for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good rest of the night.